Hello there.
Hi there.
You are recording, so you are good to start whenever you're ready.
Great. Terrific. Let's go around we call the meeting to order at 6:01. Let's go around the table. Lee, you're here.
Yeah.
Ron Mitchell, see you. Chris Larson.
Hello.
And then hosting is Miranda Fisher, and Karen Garrity is support. So we got a good group. Here's what I think we need to do tonight. We're starting with the completion of last week's work, which is two visions, one for economic development, one for municipal government. Tonight, we're supposed to start discussing what we want our goals to be. We should walk away from tonight's meeting with assignments that we can work on for the next 2 weeks, because we won't be meeting next week because of the Downtown Development Authority meeting. So we'll break into pairs over the next couple of weeks and try and put some flesh on the bones. Make sense? So I'm going to read through what I think our vision for each of the two segments is. For economic development, Netherlands thrives in a robust, diversified, long-term, sustainable economy that prioritizes the needs of its citizens and both protects and leverages its precious natural setting. Did I capture that accurately, or does anybody have anything to add since we met last time?
Seems good to me.
Seem to capture
Okay.
the discussion.
Good. And on municipal government, Netherlands government uses all the tools at its disposal to be a progressive example of what other for other small towns through transparency, creativity, dedication, and its responsiveness to the needs and goals of the entire community. Are we good?
So Tom, I was just looking, I don't think we have those in the Google folder yet. So will you send those to me so I can add them?
Right now, yeah.
Wonderful.
In fact, I'll just put it.
Now, I was just reading through it. I thought I found them. Why don't I share and show you what I found in there?
I think if you're in the same folder with me, you're looking at maybe Tom's.
Okay.
Yeah, the municipal government, the development. It sounded pretty similar, but different. Okay,
That was Tom's original, and then we have Ron's original and Chris's original, and I think we're missing the combined.
Got it.
Okay.
Do you have it where you can put it up for us? Oh, I see, in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I'll just copy and paste it from the chat too and put it in a Google.
Now, maybe a good place to start, since there's a DJ meeting next week, is Ron. I don't know much about the organization, and that's something you can fill us in on. Tell us what the group does, where they're heading, and what we should be aware of.
Well, it started 15 years ago. It has a life of 30 years. It's a special district created by the voters within a geographical boundary, which is the business district. And there's a specific law applied to it that governs its activities. The idea is for the business community to tax itself, create improvements that, hang on one second, I'm sorry, I turned my phone off. Create improvements that increase tax revenues, and then take those tax revenues and continue to reinvest them in projects that create a better business environment.
Got it.
There's a lot more, but you don't want.
And then who are members? Basically, they're people that own businesses downtown, right? So they got to have skin in the game.
They have to have skin in the game, and there's a formula that the board has to be made up of. The majority of the board must be made up of property owners, and then tenants can take up the rest of the board. that can have a board up to 13 members. Currently, we have a board of 7.
Okay, great. And what are some of the things that you guys are focused on?
Right now, we've got, I think, 3 major projects going. One is beautification, which is flowers for the town throughout the town. This is an ongoing program. It's been going on for quite a while. We work by subcommittee, and the subcommittees are pretty autonomous. We have a wayfinding committee that's working on better identification of the businesses and how to get around, and not only the businesses but the other attractions nearby. And also, we're working on a project with Public Works to create 19 more parking spaces on Big Springs. But it's fairly involved because we have to put a culvert underneath the parking before we do the parking, and we want to put a sidewalk in too. So the parking is probably about 1/3 of the entire project.
Okay, excellent. I pulled from the town site the boundaries of the district, and there was 2 documents I sent to Miranda to upload to ours so that we can at least see the boundaries and then the parcels that are possibly developable by how they're zoned. It sure generally, if we're tonight going to be we're going to be talking about economic development and municipal government, going around the table, does anybody have an idea if they had to choose one or the other to work on? Because we're going to be pairing off what they prefer to work on.
Well, I certainly would prefer
to do something you don't normally do, the not my job approach. I
certainly would want to work on development.
Good. Lee?
I think the same with me.
Great.
I think the biggest things that we face in Nederland is not government. I think the biggest thing we face is development. And so the government, I mean, if it was up to me, I would, try to change codes to make development easier in the downtown area. I would do away with old-fashioned codes that are stymieing good development. I want good development. I don't want it to be a product of the naysayers in town just saying that they don't want anything to be done and then end up with something that's crappy because of the minority.
Good. Chris, do you have a preference on economic development?
Yeah, I was taking off mute. It just took me a while to find my mouse.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
It sounds like we have 2 people who want to do economic. I think that is the place where we can have the most impact in the next 10 years. I think like it's been said in the previous meetings, I feel like the government side is doing pretty well. I'm not sure there's as much work there to do for this group, for this committee. So if anything, I would say, let's just let's throw all in on economic. We have a good vision statement for the government side of it, and let's all work on the economic.
Great. I agree with you. I'll you and I might team up on the idea we started last week on going to or moving to it was from a statutory form of government, right?
Right. We can talk about what it would take to go home rule and
Okay. Then we'll spend a couple minutes, but let's spend the bulk of our time on economic development and issues around that. Let's start to kick around some ideas. I'm keeping notes and I'll post them when we're done. So what are some of the things that are on people's mind? One of them is one that Lee just mentioned, and that was having code that reflects our priorities, right?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm not sure. There's a lot of code.
Yeah.
And that's not unique. I think that governments in general, they produce code.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but some of it is outdated, and some of it doesn't make sense. And the problem is that in today's world, I think development, if it's done right, and especially if it's done right in downtown Netherland, you can't make any money with the and developers need to make some money, otherwise they're not going to do it. With one-story buildings or two-story buildings, you know. So I think the code is the main thing that is holding us back in certain areas, and I think the zoning also. Like, for example, the old historical society site, you know, across from Schneider's Garage. I mean, in my mind, and Ron owns that piece of property, and I worked on that piece of property before Ron owned it, also for Vicky Black, and she had an idea of trying to do a subdivision there, and it turned out that the code or the zoning and the code precluded her from doing her development.
Okay.
And so it wouldn't surprise me that Ron is running into the same problems with that piece. And that piece of property is key to downtown in my mind, because, you know, if the town can work out a deal with Ron, currently Ron, or whoever ends up owning it after Ron, we could get another bridge across Middle Boulder Creek, and that's the spot to put it.
Right. Other thoughts going around the table?
Well, I think this about the codes is that, I sort of agree with Lee, and that the codes have to provide incentives, not disincentives. And what Lee mentioned was one and two-story buildings. Our current code, which is called design code, is about as broad as it is deep, and it's so most anybody can interpret anyway. But it basically says if you develop something, it has to look like, be like, and function like what's there. So that's an incentive to leave what's there and not do anything. So and so doing, it's a disincentive to development. So and that's one of the things that I think where when it comes up, the naysayers, the folks who squawk the loudest, who bellyache the loudest, have the end up with the exercising democracy by volume instead of by vote. So I would like to see, and that happens to a lot of people. The guy who just got permission to build a fourplex across from the fire station went through a lot of rhetoric from the neighbors about the height. And only when it was pointed out that if he built a duplex, he could build it 35 feet high by code, and the view that the neighbors were complaining about would go away. So, but he didn't. He lowered it twice to accommodate those people. And so one or the other should be eliminated from the code. If it's such a sin to have a duplex 35 feet high, but here's the problem. As population increases, lands don't. And so if you're limited to what you can do by a code that says it has to remain the same, the price goes outrageously high. And that's what's happening in Netherlands. You're seeing 600 square foot houses go for $400,000. So where does the twain meet, and how do you solve the problem?
Well, to be fair, we're seeing that in terms of, you know, it's not just Netherlands, it's the entire Colorado Front Range.
Sure.
It's not Netherlands codes that are driving the cost of, you know, a 600 square foot house up. That's the entire, you know, between Fort Collins and Pueblo.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
I don't either. I don't disagree with it at all, but we've got to think about Netherlands. And so it's the codes in Netherlands that are a disincentive, like Ron's saying. Those are the codes that need to be changed.
Let me give you an example of where the code is really, really bad. You can have in a unit, in the definition of a unit, anywhere from 1 bedroom to as many bedrooms as you want. So if a developer builds a 1-bedroom unit, he then doesn't have 2 things. He doesn't have any options other than to rent it to 1 person.
Yeah.
If he builds a 6-bedroom unit, it's still a unit, and he can put 6 people in there. That is an untenable, unworkable sort of arrangement. But he's limited by the number of units. So if he has 6 units with 6 bedrooms in each unit, he's housing 36 people. And that doesn't make any sense at all. So if he puts 6 1-bedroom units, he has 6 people, and he can't afford to do that. So the guy builds something that with 6 bedrooms, and then what happens? The tenants chop it up, and that's into little units. And not only do you have 6 people living in the unit, you got 10 dogs. It becomes unmanageable. So that's in our code. That's how it reads today, and that doesn't work.
Is that code statutory? Is that something that's within our power to change, or do we have to go back and?
Sure, we could change it. It'd be easy to change if people really understood and grasped the concept. But they
get your question. Yeah, that's within our power. That's not a statutory issue.
Absolutely within your power to change it.
One thing I just want to suggest so you can have a super productive rest of your meeting is try not to get mired in those specific details. Instead, approach it from what would you like, what are the things you're trying to achieve from an economic development point, and stay in the big picture.
Okay.
And Ron, I know what you're saying. I'm not trying to dismiss it. It's just that it might be more productive to stay at a higher view.
Well, you can stay at a more general view, then you get less done. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think we hit it at the beginning that having a code that reflects our economic development priorities. Is that what you're talking about, Karen?
All right, let me say this. You have to look at the market and who lives in Netherlands and what they can afford. And the people who work, there's things that influence what happens in Netherlands dramatically. Netherlands passed a free bus pass situation. So there's a lot of people, young people, who live in Netherlands, packed, 2-bedroom house, or 6 people living in it, and they're doing it because that makes the rent cheaper, and they've got a free bus pass, so they can go to work in a restaurant or somewhere down in Boulder and a half an hour and be right at their job site. So, but they're in a sharing a facility that creates stress on the neighborhood, creates parking problems. Although in that case, they leave their car at their house and they take the bus. So there's a lot to be solved, and that's a broader view, but that's something I think that needs to be looked at.
Okay, got it.
So I agree with Karen. I think that suffice it to say that we need to look at the code in the downtown area and see where government can help create redevelopment in that area, because it's coming, whether we like it or not. It's coming. To make it as best as can be. Now, in addition, I think we need to look at certain areas, what we think. I mean, the code also affects setback, and zoning affects setback. So in a perfect world, I would like to see if the downtown block is redone at some point, I'd like to see the buildings pulled back from the right-of-ways.
Okay.
Because First Street is too small. There's buildings on the south side that are in the right-of-way, up to 14 feet in the right-of-way. And so when you have a 59 or 57 foot right-of-way, and you've got 14 feet of a building and walkway into that right of way, I'd like to see the buildings on the north side of that street pulled back off the lot line. It makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense if that area is redeveloped to have large alleys for deliveries of the businesses that are in that area. And it also makes sense to have some sort of a parking structure underneath that thing. So those are all concrete examples of what we can do to try to make the downtown work. And I'll give you the example. I mean, Salto, I did the surveying for Salto, and Salto's built right up on the line. And so you see how Second Street is squeezed and Snyder Street is squeezed because of that. So that's an example.
If in a perfect world, they'd be set further back and parking along the street would be easier.
Yeah, and also there would be more parking along the street. Plus, there would be the ability to put patios on private property, in front of those. Like, let's say you pull the building back 25 feet from the lot line. That you could put a 12-foot patio or a 16-foot patio and still have room for parallel parking. So, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I go down,
you mean a head-in parking, Lee?
Either head-in or parallel, either way. I mean, I'd be open to either. But I mean, you go down in downtown Nederland now. If you go there in the morning, and there's people parked there, and then a delivery comes in to deliver to the deli or to one of the restaurants, you're blocked. I mean, you can't drive down First Street.
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. And I think the same thing can be said for Schneider Street. And Second Street is less of a problem because it's residential now, but that's the downtown area. And like I've been pushing all along, Nederland was bigger in the past. There were more big buildings in the past that burned. And so Second Street is, in the future, Second Street is going to be another First Street. It's going to be, my envisioning of Second Street is that it's another commercial area, like it was before. And so I don't know. That's a specific kind of thing.
Well,
Let's go back to.
I want to counter your specific. When you take and move the lot line back, you're also moving volume back, a lot of volume. And I think you should take that volume and put it on top of what you have, which means you're going to exceed the height limit. The current height limit makes it very awkward. You can get 3 stories in, but they're a squeeze, and you have to have a flat roof. And the story with flat roofs is not if they're going to leak, but when they're going to leak. So being able to have pitched roofs in the downtown area, to me, is something that's very desirable because it gives longevity to the building.
I agree with that 100%. I think that the city of Boulder looks like a prison community, in my opinion. It looks like a prison with all the flat roofs. It's one of the ugliest cities I've seen.
Okay.
So
I like about working with you guys. I know where you stand.
I would prefer
So just to remind you, you're not really trying to solve all the problems, right? And you're getting into the details. Really, what you're all talking about is a smart redevelopment of the downtown commercial area. I think you can get a lot more done if you stay with those kind of general statements, and that's how you can establish some goals. Then you can start looking at more tactics and such. But you've got your vision, and you have the big goal, which should be still a very big picture. So I think it's just my suggestion.
And I mean, if
I'm capturing everything, and I think some of the things where we're getting into the nits are at least allow me to go backwards towards the general, so it doesn't bother me as much.
If I were to weigh in with sort of like a general goal, sort of more of an overarching goal in terms of our economic development and downtown development, the overarching goal I would see would be developing the downtown area in a way that prioritizes the residents of Nederland. And by residents, I mean the people, not their cars. Let's make it something that people actually want to walk around, because nobody wants to walk around parking garages and crowded streets just with cars parked on it. We want something where people get out and walk around, and you know, so that like sort of the overarching goals would be prioritizing economic development plans for Nederland. And this goes more than just downtown, because we do have the economic is more than just downtown, but prioritizing the residents and the people.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, I think for Nederland, 1,400 people, I mean, has 1,400 people is a blip compared to the 2 million people that come through the town every year. It's just a blip. I mean, we're inundated with traffic. So, I mean, you know, we have to be you're right, Chris. We have to be cognizant of making it walkable, and we've tried. In my little synopsis, I mentioned, and we've worked on this a little bit. The path along the north side of the creek, I think, is another thing to do. I mean, obviously another bridge. You know, connecting the paths that we have. I think all those are positive things. But then again, I mean, compared to the 1,400 people that live in Nederland, the 2 million people really have a lot more impact than the 1,400 people.
Right, but I would argue those 2 million people are more likely to stop and do something and spend money if it is built for people and not just, you know, like, oh, it looks just like, I mean, you go to Estes Park, and I don't want us to have a downtown that's full of t-shirt and taffy. You know, every other store is the exact same thing in Estes Park, and it's filled with cars. And you can't cross the street in downtown Estes because it's a constant stream of cars. So building around a philosophy, an economic philosophy around people and not vehicles is my goal.
Well, suppose we took all the parking off of First Street, made it really walkable, made it 30 feet wide. And
we should make a pedestrian mall.
What?
Pedestrian mall.
Well, that's
take all the cars off entirely.
I wouldn't object to that, Chris, but you got to sell that to everybody on the south side of the street. And right now, they're adamantly against it. I think.
I've been saying it for 10 years, and I still haven't got anyone on my side. So,
well,
I'm on your side on that.
Business-wise,
I'm on your side too.
I think that's a wonderful idea, and I also think that the town square idea, which I've been pushing also for a long, long time. You know, the problem with that is that we lose parking places, and so where do you put them? And people aren't going to stop if they can't park.
True.
So
on the other hand, the Hesse Trail concept is a lot more people use the trail. Is a central collecting point, and it's easy to transition. Lee, talk some more about the town square concept.
Well, the town square concept is a concept that, you know, I've pushed for several different administrations. Basically, we've got the visitor center parking lot, and you know, in a perfect world, you would just get rid of that entire parking lot and just turn it into and put grass on it, and then fix up the bank going down to the river, so that you have access down to the river. And the town owns both sides of the river there now.
Okay.
In a perfect world, you'd also be able to have a path that goes under the highway, so with a grate, where people wouldn't have to go above grade crossing 119 or 72. They could go under in that culvert underneath the and meet up with the path on the other side. A less big town square idea would be to take the south half of that parking lot and turn it into a town square, leave the north half, and just use the south half. But that's another idea that, you know, I put out a couple of surveys that kind of showed that, and was pushing for it. But, you know, again, you have to replace those parking places.
Yeah. How would you do that?
Well, I think part of the way is when we redid the community center. Now the community center has a lot of parking, but it has horrible access to it because there's only one way in.
Right.
Now we solved it, but then it was squashed. There's a way to come in off 4th Street and bank up, and so that you have 2 access points. You have the current access point next to the Backdoor Theater. You have another access point that comes up the slope from 4th Street and comes into the southeast corner of that lot. You know, that's one thing. That's one place that we could put more parking. And we did create a path that goes from. That's one of the things that the topo did anyway. Even though the drainage wasn't taken, we did use that topo to create a path that goes down to 4th Street, and then from 4th Street down to the back of the Community Presbyterian Church.
Yes,
that's been a positive thing. So, I mean, that's all set. You could replace some of the parking with the community lot, community center lot.
Yes, absolutely. Is the path, I use that path all the time. Is it up to having expanded parking there and a lot more people coming into downtown?
I think it is. I mean, it's certainly steep. I mean, but at the same time, I think they did it. I mean, I did that survey, and I think it was Paul Turnberg that did the design on it. I mean, they did the best. He did the best he could. I mean, it's steep.
Yeah.
So, I think it was a win-win.
Yeah, it really does connect the community center to the downtown, and it's a pleasant walk.
Yeah.
Are there other areas, if we're on the concept now of pulling together residential into downtown for the sake of pedestrians, are there other places like that, linkages that we're not doing now that we should think about?
Well, I mean, we've got a link that goes from the community center up to the Netherland Elementary School.
Yes.
And that's more parking up there too.
Okay.
The issue of crossing the peak to peak there, which has always kind of been the stumbling block.
Yeah, that's the one drawback to that. You know, the RTD lot has more has a expansion where the sled hill is there. I mean, that's their expansion. I don't know that we really want to encourage that. I kind of like the sled hill there.
Right. I think a lot of people agree.
I don't think RTD is doing any kind of capital improvement projects anytime in the near future, given their budget situation.
That's true.
You know, I like the idea that the DDA, I like what the DDA is doing at Big Springs. I think that's a smart idea. You know, we could conceivably look at using up more of Lakeview, kind of north of the BNF, and enlarging Conger to park more cars if we do away with part of the town lot. We could also change the zoning for the Historical Society lot to allow more parking in there. Because currently that's a nice parking lot, but it's limited, I think, to 19 cars by code. So there's something we could do right away. It'd be wonderful to come up with a plan to, you know, deed over 50 feet of right of way for the extension of Schneider going down to Conger and put a bridge there. That would be wonderful. I don't know.
Would-
I don't know.
If we did that, if we did that, how many parking places do we have over at Chipeta Park?
I don't know the number, but there's a fair amount of parking there.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly would help, especially downtown without having to walk all the way back to Bridge Street.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I think Conger could be expanded also to put a parallel parking in Conger also.
So I think what I'm hearing is we have another sort of another high-arching goal about connecting the disparate parking areas in town, the underutilized parking areas.
Yeah.
And in such a way that we can, and expanding the ones that we aren't using to provide the capacity, the parking capacity that then could lead us to closing First Street, the Town Square project, reducing or removing parking from the downtown core area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great goal, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're onto something here.
And also, I think the other part would be, trying to work a deal. And I think Ron is gone for some reason, but trying to work a deal with Ron to, gain some right of way next to the apothecary, and then allow for more parking in there. But the code right now doesn't allow that. The zoning doesn't allow that.
Okay, so a high level goal would be to take a really hard look at the code to make sure that there's proper incentives and fewer disincentives.
Yeah.
What are some other incentives for smart development that would make sense that we've seen work? I just started this afternoon. I made a list of 30 small towns that I really like, and trying to learn what I can from them. But between us, what are some things we should be thinking about? And it's not Estes Park.
Well, it's not Estes Park, and it's not Estes Park for a number of reasons. Estes Park has two or three main highways coming into it, and it's a national park.
Mhm.
Four
Yeah.
main highways. So we have one bridge. We have one bridge.
Yeah.
And Estes is a much bigger place in terms of the flatness and the area that you can build downtown. Nederland doesn't have that. And unless we drain Barker Reservoir, we don't really have the space downtown to be in Estes Park.
There's a goal
Right.
we'll quote you on, Lee. We'll quote you on that goal next time you run for office.
Well, we do not have the space downtown to be.
I know.
We just don't. So I think the incentives, what we need to think about is like what we've already talked about is code changes that allow developers, and this goes back into trying to create more affordable housing. I mean, make ADUs easier, make ADUs, make them so that they can be higher, where they don't have to have a flat roof. Change the code so that developers can actually pull the buildings back and create a third floor to actually make a little bit of money. I think all these things are things that we can do.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up something that was not parking or downtown specific. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, what Ron was saying earlier, that in the end, housing has to be affordable, otherwise it turns into bubbles.
Yeah.
And as somebody who lives in 600 square feet, 2 is enough people. I don't think we could do any more. It feels more like being on a sailboat. But that comes back to height limits. And what do we need incentive, further incentives other than code changes to get somebody besides Tebow to develop?
Well, that's my fear, is that if we don't do things that are smart, we're going to end up with a developer that has enough money in their pockets.
Yeah.
It's just going to say, screw you, Netherland. I'm going to put what I want there and take me to court.
Yeah, it could definitely happen.
And I see it happening. I see it happening very clearly. And because there's so much money in Boulder County right now, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that happening. It may not be Tebow. It may not be anybody that we know. Somebody could come in and just put, something gross right in downtown Netherland, and it would be horrible.
The development above Kathmandu, is that what we're talking about when we're talking about multiple stories with a pitched roof?
Well, yeah, that and or a third story. I mean, I think that Kathmandu is probably not in the right spot for a third story, but I think there are spots, like for example, Bridge Street to Snyder Street, that drops about 15 feet.
Yeah.
So you could have a 3-story building at the east end and have a 2-story building at the west end with pitched roofs.
Good point.
So, I mean, I think we need to be creative about what we're allowing by code and by zoning.
Well, it can also be an opportunity to, trade-offs, and that was something that the Minakazi proposal or discussion we had several years ago with the DDA that that we were sent talked about, was using what the town wants and needs as leverage with a developer. Say, all right, we're going to let you have that extra 10 feet, but half of your units are going to be affordable housing. The kind of the give and take side of things is an opportunity for getting what the town needs while providing what the developer needs.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we had in our history, if we done that, is there an example we can point back to?
Well, we can point back to Mud Lake as history of where the town actually became the developer to save Mud Lake.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is historical precedent that the town has actually stepped up to the plate and said, we want this. We want to work with the powers that be, the powers that own the land, basically, because the landowner, and I'm a surveyor, so the landowner, it's private property in the end.
Yeah.
But we need to incentive. Ron was saying it becomes a disincentive, and I think he's right. We need to have incentives to develop smartly.
Yeah.
To be incentives. And you're right, Chris, there needs to be a trade-off. There's trade-offs.
And to do that, you have to know what you put the highest value on before somebody shows up even.
Right. What do you want it to look like in the end?
To answer your question, Tom, there has been conversations that were going on. I don't know why I'm
Fine now.
sounding funny, but I do know that prior to my coming on,
was able to get back on, so you had the feedback.
Okay.
Got it. And actually, Cynthia just did a report to the Board of Trustees on this, but there had been talk for a couple years about incentives to developers for, to result in a more affordable housing being built. But that got dropped mainly because STRs and ADUs kind of took over the whole conversation. That took a couple years to get through. We did, though, pass an ordinance for mixed use to encourage more mixed use happening in, in the commercial districts. like Perry's Shoe Shop, you know, where you got the business
Right.
down on the bottom and you've got residents up on top.
That's good. Was that an anomaly, or is that currently part of our code? If somebody wanted to do more like that, it could be done.
It is part of our code, the mixed use. Yeah, it is.
Right. Okay, that's really good. That's good to know. Those are two really good precedents. That was so creative, and the end result was so satisfying.
I would like to inject an example of failure in mixed use, and that's where Boulder put apartments directly above restaurants. And it just didn't work because of the sound, the vibration. Didn't matter how much insulation they put in it. The sound, the vibration still came into the residential units. So you've got to, if you're going to do mixed use in that manner, you've got to have a middle floor with either offices or something that is used during the day, but doesn't, provides an insulating barrier to the residential use above. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And
Terrific.
that was one thing. I had something else, but I've had trouble getting back on here, so I've lost a good bit of what you all had to say. I'm sorry.
Okay. Is the report that Cynthia did for the BOT on incentives private, or is it something that we could or should be looking at?
No, she didn't actually go into any detail that way. She just, when we were looking at building codes last night in the PowerPoint, there's one slide that just sort of sums up the affordability, the housing affordability efforts that have taken place in the town over like the last 10, 15 years. And one of them she mentions is that there has been on and off conversation about making some changes to the code where there is incentives for developers to build affordable housing units. And that has not really happened other than the mixed use ordinance.
Okay. How would we characterize the Tungsten Village experience? Was that a success?
Well, that, you know, because they're a nonprofit developer, the way they saved money per se is they didn't have to pay any taxes, right? No sales or use tax. They're not paying any property taxes. They did not get any discounts though. They paid all of the normal permit fees and utility fees. Now the town did work with them in the sense that they did what they're allowed to do by code, where we ended up vacating some rights of ways for them. So that this whole kind of thing worked out. They needed a certain amount of land to be able to build the 26 units. And there was kind of a land deal done between the church and the some private owners in the area and the developers. And so the town, the Board of Trustees, the Planning Commission actually recommended approval. The Board of Trustees approved it as well, sort of to make it possible for that development to happen in a way that still met all the code and is safe and aligned with the fire department and everybody else. So that's the only thing I would say you could say the town kind of worked with them on, but really this was their project and we didn't have anything in code giving them any kind of special deal or discounts on utilities or anything like that. There's nothing like that in code.
Okay.
Could I jump in here just with a whole new different idea for about 3 minutes?
Sure.
If you have. I think there's a different way to approach people getting into affordable housing. And I proffered this, but it didn't fly, but it's been done in other places. It's not an original idea by me in any means. If you build a facility where a person come in, say it's a school teacher, and they got to get on the job by the 1st of September or the 15th of August, and there's no place to stay. So you have some spot reserved for a person like that in a housing unit, and they get like almost 40% off of what the market rate is. Then they have the next year they get 30% off, and the year after that they get 20% off, and then it goes to market in the 4th or 5th year. And the reason for that is that the housing market in the Netherlands area, whether you believe it or not, does fluctuate dramatically. So if somebody has an opportunity to take a job and has to be there, but doesn't have an opportunity for housing, you provide a system whereby they've got time to play the market and get into something they like, and then they have a chance to save money, be able to put up a deposit, or even possibly buy something. And this is the kind of thing that I would proffer that would work very well. And because here's the thing with affordable housing. We now have affordable housing over there with Tungsten Village. It's filled, and those people will stay there for life. There's going to be plenty of more people, and they're particularly the young people who are upwardly mobile, and they'll start earning more money as they get older and more experienced. But you give them a permanent lifetime discount, and they will stay there for life. And New York City is a good example of this. So provide a structured incentive for the individual in the housing in addition to the developer.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I understand completely what you're saying about how it becomes institutionalized in places like New York. It happens any place it's subsidized and there's a chance to lock it in with no change. I don't know how we pay for it, but it sure makes sense in terms of accomplishing a goal.
Eagle
And
County,
also
I know, has some interesting housing programs for their teachers and police officers. It might be worth looking into.
That's great.
I think that's smart. And also ADUs. I think encouraging second floors on garages. You know, like let's say I wanted to build a garage. If I was allowed to build an ADU above it, and it was easy, it was easier to do per code with a sloped roof. Then it would make sense for me to do it, and then I could rent it out, and it wouldn't be big, but it would be big enough for somebody that wouldn't have to spend $3,000 a month to live there.
Yeah, I see that done well in Boulder and many parts of town.
Now Boulder, the problem with Boulder is that they have a 20-foot height limit, which means that all that from the low spot within 25 feet of the building, which means that they're all flat roofs.
Yeah,
which, again,
I had to deal with it.
Yeah,
It's
which again,
really difficult.
It's really annoying, and it makes it look ugly. Again, I think that's where we can use code to make it so that ADUs, if you're going to build an apartment above your garage, you're not going to have to go by the 20-foot limit or whatever the limit is, so you can actually have a pitched roof.
Yep. Okay, that's a good one, Lee.
So it feels like we're drifting into housing rather than economic development.
Well, I mean,
which I know they're linked and they're inexorably linked, but I'm just saying we have a housing committee too, right?
Right.
We do. And for Karen and Miranda, is there anything going? You've sat in on those. Is there anything going on in housing that we should be aware of as we focus on economic development?
So housing got delayed and they're not going to meet until Friday. Now your benefit is Ron is also on that committee, so he can serve as a great liaison. But yeah, they'll meet this Friday at 5.
Okay, good. We've got 6 minutes left, and what I'm going to try to do is, I've got some things that are incredibly drilled down in terms of being very prescriptive. What I'm going to try and do is step it back up several levels, as Karen was suggesting, and I'll get that done tomorrow. And I'd like to circulate it among our group and see if we're resonating or coming around a set of ideas that make sense, and see if I missed something. Does that make sense for process?
Fine with me.
Beg pardon?
That's good with me.
Okay. Any closing thoughts on goals around? We've focused almost 100% around economic development tonight. Very little bit around government, other than one point. Anything else that comes to mind as we come towards the end of this session?
Again, I think it's smart to focus on that because I think our government is, for the most part, pretty transparent, and I think it does its job fairly well.
Yeah, when I went back and looked at 2020, I saw what we aspired to be. I think we largely did it.
And I think that's something we want to, when we write this up in the Envision 2030s, I think we should emphasize that. Let's, we emphasize the successes. Hey, we're building on a tradition of success here. And
Yeah.
now we, like, hey, we succeeded over here and here, and now we need to focus our attentions over here.
In terms of undone things, I think Miranda has mentioned further digitization of records is still something that's undone.
Always. But I do know that there's a couple interesting projects in the work some trustees are working on to help with sort of the transparency of government and the project side. And, I'm going to leave it to them to roll it out when they are ready. But there are some very cool things in the pipeline to help with that.
That's great. I think in the end we'll mention it because it's this is a 10-year document and it sounds like we're well underway. Anything else that people are thinking of as we come to an end this evening?
Tom, since you have a 2-week break before you reconnect with the DDA, is the plan that everyone will just kind of keep working on this document and sending on their thoughts and feedback?
Yeah.
So what's their homework?
It's your homework.
That's good.
I'll write it up and make it as simple and as high level as possible. And let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Deal?
Deal.
Okay. Then
what I'm going to do also is I'm going to send a couple of PDFs that I have that show the downtown square idea, and also that show the path idea on the north side of the creek.
That would be helpful. I'm really I have to see stuff. I'm a visual.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'm really glad you brought up the concept of using slope to your advantage. I hadn't thought much about until I walk a lot. So you really do have more room over there.
Yeah.
And code doesn't take that into account.
Right.
Okay. Then we're complete.
Sounds like
Thank
it.
You.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Okay.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
See ya.